Okay, let's dive right into this. Every time you book a flight, you're not just buying a seat. You're actually entering into a pretty serious legal contract. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the exact promises or obligations the airline legally makes to you the second that ticket is confirmed. So let's start with the big question. When you buy that plane ticket, what are the airlines, or as the law calls it, the air carriers, actual legal obligations to you? What are your rights as a passenger? Let's find out. You know that ticket on your phone? It's so much more than just a boarding pass. Legally, it's something called a contract of international carriage. And the key word here is bilateral, meaning the promises go both ways. The airline owes you things, and you owe them things. It's a two-way street. But here's the thing. It's a very specific type of contract. It's known as a contract of acquiescence. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, it means you, the passenger, are seen as the weaker party. You don't get to negotiate the terms. You basically just accept them as they are, or you don't fly. Simple as that. And because of that power imbalance, because you can't really negotiate, the law has to step in to protect you. It sets up really clear, non-negotiable obligations for the air carrier. So let's dive into the three biggest ones you need to know about. First up, we have the most basic, most fundamental promise of them all, the obligation to perform the contract. This is the absolute heart of the whole deal. Put simply, the airline's number one job is to get you from the airport you left from to the airport you're supposed to land at. That's the core service you paid for, right? But the obligation goes a little deeper than that. It's not just about getting you there, it's about how they get you there. And the law is super specific on this. The airline has to use what's called an airworthy aircraft. So what does airworthy actually mean? Airworthiness is really split into two different parts. On one side, you've got physical airworthiness. This is all about your comfort and the services you were promised. But on the other, much more critical side, you have technical airworthiness, which is all about the safety and the basic functioning of the plane itself. So, for example, physical airworthiness would be things like the in-flight entertainment working or getting the meal you selected. But technical airworthiness, that's the life or death stuff. The engine safety, the communication gear, the fire extinguishers, and the proof that the plane has been properly maintained. And this isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. No way. The airline has a continuous obligation to keep that aircraft maintained. They have to follow the highest international standards, constantly ensuring the plane is safe to fly. Okay, so that brings us perfectly to the second main obligation, the obligation to ensure passenger safety. This one goes beyond just the plane's mechanics and focuses directly on you, the passenger. The legal muscle behind this comes from a major international treaty, the Montreal Convention of 1999. Article 17, paragraph 1, says it loud and clear. The carrier is liable if a passenger dies or is physically injured. It's a huge protection. However, and this is a really important detail, this air carrier liability doesn't cover everything everywhere. It only kicks in if the accident that caused the harm happens within a very specific window of time defined by the convention. So, for the carrier to be liable, three conditions have to be met. First, the injury has to be caused by an accident. Second, that accident has to happen while you are on board the aircraft. Or third, if not on board, it has to have happened during the process of boarding or disembarkation. All right, let's move on to our third and final main obligation. This one is all about your stuff, the obligation to carry personal effects. The airline's responsibility doesn't just stop with you, it also covers your belongings. This obligation basically covers two main categories of your stuff. First, the personal items you have with you in the cabin, your carry-on, and second, your checked baggage, the bags that you hand over to the airline. They're obligated to transport both of them safely. So, we've walked through these three pillars of an airline's responsibilities. Let's just take a step back and look at the bottom line. What's the big takeaway here? The bottom line is this. These obligations aren't just details buried in the fine print. They are the entire legal framework that exists to make sure international air travel is safe, predictable, and fair for every single passenger. That's the whole point. But this all leaves us with a really important question. We have this solid legal framework from 1999, but as aviation keeps evolving with new technologies and new global challenges, is the protection that the Montreal Convention offers still enough for the complex realities of flying today? That's something to think about.